Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a frozen wilderness. The wind is screaming past your ears. Snow stretches in every direction. No roads, no tire tracks. No sign that anyone has ever been here before. Every step feels like a mistake. And that's when a machine appears. Not a truck. Not a snowmobile. Something stranger. Something that looks like it shouldn't work, yet somehow does. Today, you're about to discover some of the most unusual off-road snow vehicles ever built. Machines that ignored the rules. Designs that pushed through blizzards, glaciers, frozen forests, and white deserts where normal vehicles simply gave up. Some were built for survival. Some for war. Others for pure invention. And the wildest part is this. Every single one of these machines actually existed and they worked. Stick with me because by the end of this journey, you'll see just how far humans will go when snow stands in the way. Let's start in the brutal winters of post-war Canada, where snow wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a barrier to life. In the late 1940s, remote communities were cut off for months at a time. Roads vanished under drifts taller than houses. That's when an inventor named Joseph Armand Bombardier decided snow shouldn't win. His answer was the Bombardier J5. At first glance, it didn't look fast or flashy. It looked serious. Like a machine built with one goal: keep moving no matter what. Under its boxy metal shell sat a Chrysler inline-six engine. Nothing fancy, but dependable. The J5 rode on wide rear tracks that spread its weight over the snow, while the front used skis or wheels to steer. It didn't float over snow like modern snowmobiles. It crushed through it. The enclosed cabin mattered just as much as the engine. Inside, people stayed warm. Doctors, mail carriers, power line inspectors. In some mountain towns, the J5 became the only way ambulances could reach the sick during winter storms. Even today, restored J5 units still run, a reminder that survival sometimes comes from stubborn engineering rather than speed. And just when you think that's as strange as snow vehicles get, the next one takes a sharp turn into mechanical madness. Picture a vehicle that doesn't rely on one set of tracks or two, but four, one on each corner. This was the Tucker Snowcat 443, built in the United States during the 1960s. It looked like something designed by an engineer who refused to compromise. Each track was independently suspended. That meant when one corner climbed a snowbank, the other stayed planted. Under the hood was a powerful V8 engine that delivered steady torque instead of speed. And that mattered because this machine wasn't about racing, it was about never getting stuck. The 443 could pivot, crawl, and maneuver through snow that swallowed other vehicles whole. Utility companies used it to maintain power lines in winter. Scientists trusted it on long expeditions across untouched landscapes. One expedition crossed hundreds of miles of Alaskan wilderness with no support vehicles. If the Tucker failed, there was no backup. It didn't fail. Even now, many Tucker snowcats are still working, still earning their keep decades later. But what if you didn't need a giant snow beast? What if your job was smaller, but just as dangerous? That's where the Tucker Snow Kitten comes in. Smaller, lighter, and far more agile, this machine was built for narrow trails and quick access missions. It used rear tracks for propulsion and skis up front for steering. Simple, but effective. The cabin was tight, loud. Cold crept in through every seam, but it went where nothing else could. Forest rangers used snow kittens to patrol during massive blizzards. Telecom workers used them to reach mountaintop relay stations. In one case, a snow kitten equipped with a radio stayed operational for weeks during a storm that knocked out all other communication. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't pretty, but it showed up when it mattered. And sometimes, that's all a machine needs to do. Now let's shift gears to something even stranger. Imagine a machine that looks like a farm tool, sounds like one and rides like one. That was Boland's Husky, built in Canada in the 1960s. It wasn't designed by a major military contractor or a high-budget company. It was designed for people who simply needed to get things done. Farmers, hunters, rural families. The Husky used a small single-cylinder engine. On paper, it looked weak. But it was light. Very light. That meant it skimmed across packed snow instead of sinking. A single rear track pushed it forward while a metal ski up front handled steering. No suspension. No luxury. Just function. In Quebec, farmers used huskies to haul firewood and supplies during winter when horses struggled. Milk cans were dragged across frozen fields behind these machines. They became part of daily life, and that's what made them special. Not heroic expeditions, just survival through simplicity. But now we step into war, and war always produces some of the strangest machines ever built. During World War II, the US military faced a problem. How do you move troops and equipment through snow, swamps, and mountains? The answer was the M29 Weasel. Small, tracked, and brutally simple, it looked like a miniature tank. Powered by a modest inline-six engine, it didn't rely on speed. It relied on traction. Wide tracks spread its weight. Torsion bar suspension kept it stable. Soldiers trusted it in places where trucks died. It carried supplies across the Alps. It moved troops through deep snow in northern Europe. After the war, civilians bought surplus weasels and put them to work at ski resorts and remote facilities. Some are still used today for emergency response. Imagine trusting a machine built for war to rescue people decades later. That's legacy. And if you think military snow vehicles stop there, the next machine proves how experimental things really got. During the 1940s, engineers weren't afraid to try wild ideas. One of those ideas became the M7 snow vehicle. Only a handful were ever built. Lightweight, skeletal, almost fragile looking. But it worked. A simple engine, rear tracks, a wide front ski. It could be transported by aircraft. Easy to repair in the field. Field tests showed it handled extreme cold surprisingly well. Though it never entered full production, its influence shaped future designs. One restored M7 ran perfectly after sitting unused for over 70 years. That's not luck. That's good engineering. And just when you think snow vehicles can't get more aggressive, modern designers took the idea and turned it wild. Take an ATV, replace the wheels with 4 tracks. Give it serious power. That's the Arctic Cat Quad Track. Built for deep snow and mountain terrain, it combines speed with flotation. 4 independent tracks meant it stayed stable even at high speeds. Rescue teams loved it. Hunters relied on it. Some versions competed in endurance races across frozen landscapes. It looked like a machine that didn't care about limits. And it didn't. And we're only getting started. The next part gets bigger, stranger, and more unbelievable. Vehicles that bend in the middle. Machines that look half animal, half tank. And one that barely even qualifies as a ground vehicle at all. The deeper you go into extreme snow machines, the stranger the designs become. Because once engineers realized wheels alone would never win against deep snow, they stopped caring how weird a vehicle looked. They only cared if it moved forward. And that mindset gave birth to one of the most unusual snow vehicles ever built. A machine that bends in the middle like a mechanical snake. The Hägglunds BV206. First developed in Sweden during the Cold War, this vehicle wasn't built for comfort or style. It was built for survival above the Arctic Circle. At first glance, it looks like 2 boxes on tracks connected by a hinge. But that hinge is the secret. It allows the front and rear sections to twist independently, keeping all tracks planted on uneven snow and ice. Under the body sits a rugged engine designed to keep running in extreme cold where fuel thickens and metal contracts. The BV206 could carry soldiers, scientists, or rescue teams across frozen lakes, deep powder, and even thin ice without sinking. It spread its weight so well that it could float where people couldn't safely walk. Over time, it became more than a military vehicle. It became a snow ambulance, a polar research transport, even a school bus in Arctic communities. If a blizzard cut off a village, this was often the machine that broke through. But now, let's rewind the clock and head back into World War II again. Because this next vehicle looks like it escaped from a mechanical nightmare. Half motorcycle, half tank. Completely insane, the German Kencraft. Officially known as the SDKFZ-2, it was originally designed to tow equipment across rough terrain. But in snow, it became something special. The front looked like a motorcycle, complete with handlebars. The rear used tank-style tracks for drive. Steering combined both systems. At slow speeds, the handlebars controlled the front wheel or ski. At sharper turns, braking individual tracks helped pivot the vehicle. Powered by a compact engine, it didn't sound intimidating, but it pulled far more than it should have. Soldiers used it to tow artillery, move supplies, and navigate snowy forests where trucks couldn't fit. On the Eastern Front, it became a lifeline during brutal winters. After the war, farmers discovered it worked just as well pulling sledge and equipment through snow-covered fields. Even today, restored kencrafts appear at winter events, still running, still turning heads, still confusing everyone who sees one for the first time. If that felt strange, get ready, because now we're entering a category that barely makes sense at all. Snow vehicles that don't use tracks, don't use wheels, and don't even rely on traction in the normal way. The snowplane. Built across Canada and northern regions from the 1930s through the 1960s, snowplanes were a desperate solution to vast frozen distances. Instead of tracks, they used skis. Instead of transmissions, they used airplane propellers. Imagine a small cabin mounted on skis with a massive spinning propeller at the back. No wings, no lift. Just raw thrust pushing the machine across frozen lakes and open snowfields. The engine roared like an aircraft. The propeller blasted snow behind it in massive clouds. On hard-packed snow, these machines could reach incredible speeds. Doctors used them to reach isolated patients. Teachers used them to get to remote schools. In one famous case, a snowplane crossed dozens of miles through a blizzard to deliver emergency medical aid. They were loud, dangerous, and unbelievably effective. Eventually, snowmobiles replaced them. But snowplanes remain one of the boldest experiments in winter travel ever attempted. Now let's slow things down again and talk about a vehicle that didn't rely on speed or power, but on clever balance. The Soviet-era aerosani. These were essentially wooden sleds powered by aircraft engines and propellers. Built during the early and mid-20th century, aerosani were used for patrol, transport, and reconnaissance across frozen terrain. They skimmed across snow and ice, incredibly lightweight and fast. Soldiers loved them because they could move silently at low throttle and disappear just as quickly. But they were also dangerous. Thin armor, open cabins. One mistake and you were exposed to the elements. Despite that, they worked. They moved messages, supplies, and troops across frozen battlefields where no road existed. Today, restored aerosani sit in museums, looking like relics from a forgotten future. And just when you think engineers learned their lesson about mixing aircraft parts with ground vehicles, modern designers did it again. But this time with precision, snowbikes. Motorcycles fitted with rear tracks and front skis. At first, the idea sounds ridiculous. But once you see one climb a snowy mountain trail, it suddenly makes sense. The rear track provides traction. The front ski floats and steers. Riders lean and balance like a normal bike, but instead of slipping, the machine digs in. Snowbikes became popular with extreme riders and rescue teams who needed speed and agility in deep snow. They could reach places even snowmobiles struggled with. They weren't easy to ride. They demanded skill. But in the right hands, they were unstoppable. And now, let's talk about a machine that looks like it belongs in a sci-fi movie. The Snowtrack ST4. Built in Sweden during the 1950s, it was designed as a compact snow crawler for civilian and military use. Unlike bulky snowcats, the Snowtrack was small, enclosed, and relatively fast. It used rubber tracks, which were quieter and smoother than metal ones. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. Warm, controlled, easy to drive. Scientists used them in polar research. Ski resorts used them for transport. Adventurers used them to explore frozen wilderness. It became one of the most successful snow vehicles of its kind, proving that extreme capability didn't always require extreme size. And if you're wondering how all these machines connect, here's the truth. None of them were built to impress. They were built because snow doesn't care about plans. Snow doesn't care about schedules. Snow isolates, traps, and kills. And every one of these vehicles is a response to that reality. Different places, different problems, different solutions, but the same goal. Keep moving. And the final stretch of this journey is where things get truly unbelievable. Machines that blur the line between vehicle and invention, designs so strange they seem fake, and one final snow vehicle that might be the most outrageous ever built. By now, you've probably noticed a pattern. The colder and more isolated the environment, the more fearless the designs become. Engineers stop worrying about what looks normal and start focusing on what survives. And that thinking leads us to a machine that feels less like a vehicle and more like a moving fortress. The Antarctic Snow Cruiser. Built by the United States in the late 1930s, this massive machine was intended to roam the frozen continent for months at a time. It was enormous, taller than most houses, longer than a bus. Inside, it had sleeping quarters, a kitchen, fuel storage, and space for research equipment. On paper, it sounded unstoppable, but Antarctica had other ideas. The massive rubber tires were designed to spread weight across snow, but in reality they struggled in soft terrain. Still, the snow cruiser wasn't a failure. It taught engineers a harsh lesson about scale and surface pressure, and pieces of it were later used as a base for Antarctic research stations. Even in failure, it pushed exploration forward. Learning from that, designers shifted towards smarter, more flexible solutions. Enter the modern snow groomer turned expedition machine, vehicles like the Piston Bully Extreme. Originally designed to groom ski slopes, these machines evolved into off-road snow beasts capable of climbing glaciers and hauling heavy loads. With wide tracks, advanced suspension, and enclosed heated cabins, they became favorites for film crews, scientists, and extreme adventurers. Some were modified to climb near vertical icy slopes using winch systems anchored deep into the snow. Imagine driving straight up a frozen wall with nothing but cables and traction keeping you alive. These machines didn't just move across snow, they dominated it. And then there are the vehicles built for places humans were never meant to stay. Deep Arctic oil fields, remote radar stations, emergency response zones. That's where the Rollgon comes in. Designed in the 1950s, the Rollgon used massive low-pressure tires instead of tracks. These tires looked like balloons and barely touched the ground. That meant the vehicle could float across snow, sand, mud, even water without sinking. It looked ridiculous, like a toy inflated too much, but it worked. The military tested it. Oil companies loved it. It could carry heavy loads over terrain that destroyed normal vehicles. Even today, the Rollgon concept influences modern off-road design. Now let's talk about something even more niche. Rescue machines built for moments when everything has gone wrong. Avalanche response vehicles. These machines aren't about speed. They're about control. Some use telescoping tracks that adjust width depending on snow conditions. Others use hybrid systems combining skis, tracks, and articulated frames. One wrong move during a rescue can trigger another avalanche. That's why these vehicles are designed to move slowly, deliberately, and safely. Many of them never appear in advertisements or museums. But when disaster hits, they are the difference between life and death. And speaking of rescue, few machines earn respect like glacier transport vehicles. Built to cross ice riddled with hidden crevasses, these vehicles distribute weight carefully and move with extreme precision. Some designs use long, flexible tracks. Others rely on articulated frames that bend as the ice shifts beneath them. Explorers trust these machines with their lives, because falling through the ice isn't an inconvenience. It's the end. Now let's take a step into the experimental world again. During the mid-20th century, inventors tested screw-propelled vehicles. Imagine two giant metal cylinders under a vehicle shaped like corkscrews. As they rotate, they pull the machine forward through snow, mud, or ice. These machines look like science fiction nightmares. Loud, slow, awkward. But in deep, soft snow and swamps, they could go where nothing else could. The Soviet Union tested them extensively. So did the United States. They never became mainstream, but they proved one thing. When the terrain is bad enough, even wheels and tracks aren't enough. And then there are the vehicles built by individuals. Backyard engineers, rural inventors, people who couldn't wait for companies to solve their problems. Homemade snow crawlers built from spare parts, tractor engines, and welded frames. Some used tank tracks salvaged from military surplus. Others used conveyor belts turned into tracks. These machines weren't pretty, but they worked. In isolated regions, these homemade vehicles became legends. Passed down through families, modified over decades. Proof that innovation doesn't always come from factories. And now, let's talk about silence. Electric snow vehicles. Modern designs focused on reducing noise for wildlife research and rescue operations. These machines move quietly across snow, leaving only faint tracks behind. No engine roar, no exhaust, just motion. In fragile environments, silence matters. And these machines show how snow travel continues to evolve even today. As strange as all of these vehicles are, they share one thing. They exist because someone refused to accept that snow was an obstacle. They saw it as a challenge, a problem worth solving. And the final chapter of this journey brings us to the most unbelievable machines of all. Designed so bold, so strange, that even engineers doubted them. The last part includes the wildest concepts ever put on snow. Vehicles that defy logic, blur categories, and leave you wondering how they even stayed upright. At the very edge of snow vehicle design, you find machines that barely make sense until you see them move. Vehicles built not by committees or corporations, but by individuals who ask the dangerous question, what if we try this? One of the strangest examples comes from experimental snow walkers. Machines that use mechanical legs instead of tracks or wheels. Inspired by animals that walk on snow without sinking, these vehicles step forward slowly, lifting their weight 1 foot at a time. They look awkward, unstable, almost alive. But in deep powder where everything else sinks, they move. Engineers tested them in Arctic conditions, proving that walking might sometimes beat rolling. They never became practical for everyday use, but they pushed the boundaries of what movement on snow could be. Then there are the massive tracked caravans designed for long-term survival. Vehicles built to become home. Some Arctic exploration vehicles are essentially mobile bases carrying fuel, food, sleeping quarters, and laboratories. They crawl across ice for weeks at a time. Every system is redundant because failure means death. Engines are designed to run constantly to prevent freezing. Tracks are wide enough to distribute weight evenly across fragile ice. Inside, heaters fight temperatures that can kill exposed skin in minutes. These vehicles don't rush, they endure. And that's what makes them incredible. And then comes the machine that truly defies logic, the rotating drum snow vehicle. Instead of tracks, its entire body rotates like a rolling barrel. As it spins, the vehicle moves forward. Inside, the crew compartment stays upright using internal stabilization. From the outside, it looks like a massive wheel rolling across the snow. From the inside, it feels like sitting inside a spinning planet. This design was tested in extreme environments to see if continuous rotation could prevent sinking. It worked, but controlling it was another story. It never reached production, but it remains one of the wildest ideas ever put on snow. Now imagine a vehicle that doesn't just travel across snow, but under it. Snow tunneling machines designed to carve paths through packed snow and ice. These machines are used in extreme research environments to create shelters and supply routes beneath the surface. They chew through snow like a drill through wood. Quiet, relentless, invisible from above. In places where surface travel is too dangerous, underground snow movement becomes the safer option. It's not fast, but it's safe. And finally, we reach the machine that feels like the ultimate symbol of human refusal to stop. Hybrid snow exploration vehicles that combine tracks, skis, propellers, and articulation into one design. They don't fit into categories. They adapt. If snow becomes ice, they glide. If it becomes powder, they crawl. If terrain breaks apart, they bend. These machines are rare, expensive, and built in small numbers, but they represent the future. Vehicles that don't fight snow. They cooperate with it. When you look back at all these machines, from simple tracked haulers to walking snow beasts and rolling drums, one thing becomes clear. Snow has never stopped humans. It has only forced us to get more creative. Every one of these vehicles exists because someone refused to turn back. Because someone needed to move forward when the world turned white. So now the question is yours. Which of these machines surprised you the most? Which one would you trust your life with in a full-blown blizzard? And if you could take just one of them into the frozen unknown, which would it be? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey into the strangest snow vehicles ever built, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. It helps more people discover stories like this because the cold never stops. And neither does innovation. The narrative perspective used throughout this script is second person, speaking directly to the viewer as if they are standing inside the frozen environment themselves. This creates immersion and keeps the viewer emotionally involved, making them feel like they are part of the journey rather than just watching a list of machines. The storytelling devices used include strong hooks, curiosity gaps, escalation, vivid environmental imagery, comparison between machines, cliffhanger-style transitions between sections, and emotional stakes tied to survival, war, rescue, and exploration. Each vehicle is treated like a character with a purpose and legacy rather than a technical object.